I was looking back at my video, it has to be Biden, and I was wondering, was that maybe a little premature as a title? Um, Now, make no mistake about it, I am absolutely adamant that Trump has to be defeated. I think he is the worst president in my lifetime. I'll get into why I'm so anti-Trump in a minute. And by the way, that isn't blind opposition to Trump. There's there is a basis for that from my point of view. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about Joe Biden because he is almost certainly going to be the nominee. Um, I mean, Sanders isn't totally out yet. He did win California. We'll see what happens on the 11th of March. I think, though, if he stays in, and if he stays in till June, Tim Stanley actually made a compelling case in the Daily Telegraph about this. That could be giving a gift to Donald Trump because a bitter internal fight, as the Democrats have seen election after election, could be a real problem. There was bitter feuding between Sanders and Hillary Clinton. There was bitter feuding between Obama and Hillary Clinton, although in that year, oh wait, of course, Obama won anyway. But I think that if Bernie loses without grace, i.e., if he contests results or if he stays in just to be a thorn in Biden's side, I don't think that will help the Democratic Party. I don't think I think that would also damage Sanders' credibility as a practical politician. Of course, loss is hard, especially when you've got to that level. And on a personal basis, I'm sure Sanders supporters, and frankly, even I would feel a little sympathy with him, just from a human perspective, because he has put himself wholeheartedly into campaign after campaign. It's not hard not to have a little politics aside, a little human empathy for that. It would be difficult to lose, but I think he would have to endorse Biden fully if he continues this trajectory. For example, if on the 11th of March Biden has another strong performance. I forget the states that are up that night, but I think that is very, very important. I mean, let's face it, this has come down now to a two-man race, Biden versus Sanders. I don't even count Tulsi Gabbard. I don't know why she's still in. Goodness knows, maybe she'll want to get her appearances on Fox News. I don't have a very high opinion of Tulsi Gabbard. I don't like her politics. And I think it's cynical for her to present herself as a pacifist when she visited Assad. But I think that's less of an issue than it would be if she was a more heavyweight candidate. If she was a front runner, I would be shouting this from the rooftops, scrutinise her for that visit. But she's not, so it's not really relevant. Um, so, Joe Biden, is he the perfect candidate? No, he's not. I can see a number of issues with Biden. This is why maybe I was premature to present the last video as being wholeheartedly endorsing of the man. But between Biden and Trump, for me, that's a no-brainer. It has to be Biden in that sense. What are where are the chinks in the armor, so to speak? There are uncomfortable questions about Biden's touchy-feely record with women and even teenage girls. Now, in the Me Too era, that hasn't really got that much spotlight so far, but Trump and the Trump campaign will almost certainly use that. And I think the Biden campaign has to be prepared for that. Um, Biden has said that he apologized if he's made anyone uncomfortable and he'll learn from it. And as far as I know, he hasn't done anything questionable in that domain since this has emerged, but it will be used. Um, and some of it goes well beyond the whole folksy Joe next door image. I think some of it is a little bit questionable. Um, I don't think that's a smear campaign. I think it just speaks for itself. I've seen the videos and they're hard to condone, and I hope it's bad judgment as opposed to something deeper. But there's no evidence that it is deeper at this point. However, like I say, the Trump campaign's absolutely going to use that, so the Biden campaign has to be prepared for that. What else? I don't know if Biden's been as consistent in policy areas as Sanders has. Say what you want about Bernie Sanders, I think he has been consistent. I mean, he's been consistently well to the left. I've just watched Vox video, actually, VOX, where they said they had these sort of titles leading on the main candidates, the case for Sanders, the case for Biden. And they pointed out an interesting thing about Sanders. Actually, for all his rhetoric of revolution and these grand sweeping ideas, he's actually quite a practical politician, which is why he survived so long. And if you look at some old videos, a lot of Sanders' positions are actually quite dull, day to day, run of the mill sort of issues. For example, when he was mayor of Burlington in Vermont, those weren't exactly far left radical positions, they were pretty normal, dull positions. That doesn't mean, though, that he's not consistent, and I think Sanders has been consistent. So I think a lot of the Sanders people would maybe point to Joe Biden and say, well, he pitches progressive credentials at some points, but then he's moderate in other areas and he's reached across the aisle. I think for some Sanders supporters, that would really be a sticking point. However, I came across a post that the Biden campaign put yesterday. Apparently, there was some alt right type unfurled a Nazi flag at a Sanders event. Now, if Sanders gets the nomination and he wins, he would be the first Jewish American president. So, uh, how did Biden respond to this? He unequivocally condemned it. And he said, I don't care who you support, that's repugnant, it's got no place in America. I cannot see Donald Trump doing that with any competitor, whether our internal rival or whether a Democratic rival. Trump doesn't have the grace or integrity to do that. Biden does. That's where Biden is statesmanlike in a way that Trump will never be. So, and I noticed a lot of Sanders supporters were appreciative of that, appreciative of the fact that Biden didn't waste time in condemning that. Incidentally, talking of that sort of pitch, I remember when John Edwards was running back in '08, he came third to Obama and Clinton. He actually said, if you are voting for me because you don't want a woman or you don't want an African American, I don't want your vote. And I think something is to be said for politicians who stick their neck out in that way. And again, I know John Edwards has his controversy, but and John McCain, another example, that famous incident at the rally when the woman claimed that Obama wasn't an American. McCain famously said, no, ma'am, he's a good family man. I just happen to have differences. Those are things that Trump can never do. So people can talk about Trump's cleaning up the swamp. I would argue Trump's brought the swamp to the White House. Um, but anyway, with Biden, I've looked at his website, some of the policy positions. Some of them I think definitely go far more to the progressive side of things than the moderate side of things. I mean, his policies on crime, for example, are pretty lefty, mm, too lefty for my liking. I mean, there's a lot there about criminal justice reform, lowering prison numbers. Fair enough, the United States incarcerates too many people for non-violent crimes, but I don't see much actually in the way of helping victims. Now, in that area, I'm quite conservative. So if I were an American voter, I would say, okay, Joe, what about the victims? But then I look at his record. Joe Biden, of course, was one of the sponsors of the 1994 crime bill, which was pretty tough on crime. And actually, it contributed to more incarcerations. Bill Clinton actually said that was one of his regrets about that bill. So that may be picked up. However, it also shows to me that actually Biden isn't that lefty when it comes to crime. Maybe he is pitching that language for this nomination. Now, that might be cynical, but it's politics. All in all, I think that America could do much worse than Joe Biden, and that in itself doesn't mean it's not enough of a reason to say he'll be a good president. But I do think that this is a man who can't be dismissed. I mean, there's this pejorative Sleepy Joe. Um, I think some of that's a little bit, some of the critique in that area is a little bit desperate. I mean, for example, he was attacked for mixing up his wife and his sister, but that was just a practical thing. They were standing behind him. Anyone could do that. I think if you're going to attack him for that sort of thing, that's just. Um, I mean, he is an older candidate. He would be the oldest president ever by far, surpassing Trump by 7 years. So that is a legitimate question. I think on the campaign trail, he seems to have plenty of energy. But then so do all these septuagenarians, in a sense. Particularly, I mean, Warren and Sanders also seem to have energy for their age. So I think that is a valid question. But there has been indication, and I need to see how strong this indication is that Biden would only serve as a one-term president. Now, I think he would get a lot of acclaim if he made a vow to only be a one-term president. That's very rare. Most presidents, by by logic, tend to go for another term of office. Um, but like I say, he's 77 now. Come inauguration day would be 78, I guess. And after a full term, he would be 82 years old. If he'd done two terms, he would come out of the White House at 86 years old. And even if he has his full mental faculties, physically, common sense would dictate that he just wouldn't have the energy that he would have now or 10 years ago. And that does matter when you're in one of the most pressurizing jobs in the world. Um, Of course, there's other older leaders around the world, but they are in countries that don't have the same level of scrutiny and power as the United States has. But then people are living longer. So the age thing, I think, will come up. I'm surprised actually it has been relatively mute, given that all these candidates are old. I'm surprised that, I mean, on both sides, Trump's in his 70s, Sanders is in his 70s, Biden's in his 70s. Um, I think it would be interesting for Biden to choose a younger running mate, someone like Pete Buttigieg. That would be interesting to show that, okay, I'm going to be a one-term president, and this is the future generation. On the other hand, I also think it would be sensible to choose a woman. Amy Klobuchar is the obvious example there, but then Elizabeth Warren might be, a pitch to the progressives. But then, Warren herself is in her 70s, so you'd have two candidates, a ticket that combined are 140 years old plus. So, anyway, that's further down the line. Joe Biden, I think that where he has strength, he is unquestionably an experienced politician. No one can deny that. And he has been both an outsider and an insider to Washington. That's a very strong card. Because it's all very well saying, "Oh, this person's an outsider." That's a populist pitch, but it also means that you don't know Washington. Now, where Biden has strength is he does know Washington. He's a Washington insider, but he's also an outsider. He spent years in Scranton. Um, the man has personal courage. He has suffered, okay, a lot of people have. He suffered personal losses, but the way he dealt with that, he showed toughness. He showed grit. He showed moral, well, he showed courage. And I do think that counts for something. Um, and for me, Biden's centrist overall. I mean, looking at his campaign positions, he's more progressive, certainly, than Bill Clinton was, certainly than a lot of other Democratic presidents were in the past. But he is moderate compared to Sanders or Warren. Now, that may be the best pitch in this particular election. And I also believe that Biden can win where it matters. Sanders has huge support has a huge support base, but could Sanders? I mean, the thing is, all the polling shows that all these Democrats beat Trump in a general election with the popular vote, but will they beat him in the electoral college vote? That's where it matters. I mean, let's not forget Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. She lost because of the way the system is. I think Biden can win beyond the two coasts, and that really matters in a general election. Okay, so round this off with why I so want to see Trump beaten. Quite simply, I think Donald Trump serves Donald Trump. I do not believe. You see, I if I were an American, I would be probably more pro-Democrat, certainly because of their position on the gun issue. But I dislike the identity politics of the Democrats. And by the way, that's one thing that I'm not too hot on with the Biden campaign. He's come out with statements about trans rights. That's all very well, but would that extend to silencing women? Women, would it extend to some of the trajectory we've seen in terms of trans lobby, the sort of things that they're demanding in terms of thought policing and so on? So there's areas like that I would definitely scrutinise the Biden campaign. And when it comes to identity politics, I deeply dislike the way the Democrats are going. I don't think that Biden is necessarily that wholeheartedly into that side of things. Sure, he says the right things, but maybe, in the end of the day, he's a politician. And for once, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because I don't want to see a president pitch even more to the divisive, regressive left. And I think that Warren and Sanders would. I don't think Biden would. So if you dislike the Democrats because of identity politics, then Biden wouldn't go that far. I really don't think he would. Of course, he talks about egalitarianism. He signed the Violence Against Women Act, etc., etc. His record speaks for itself, but I also think he would be practical. I mean, the fact that he's reached across the aisle, that is a good thing. Um, I just think that, sorry, I'm interrupting myself here. Right, so Trump. I just think, like I say, I believe that Trump exists for Trump. I don't, but I believe Trump will say anything to any target audience, and you could say any politician does that. But with Donald Trump, this is a president whose whose presidency is defined by his own ego. This is a president who conducts diplomacy via Twitter. This is a president who panders to hostile foreign dictators whilst denigrating allies. This is a president who has seen more internal resignations than any other president in his first term. This is a president who who has basically brought gutter language to the norm, and he has the audacity to talk about cleaning up the swamp. Um, I mean, when I look at all the presidents in my lifetime, back when Bush 43 was president, he was a deeply controversial figure. Now, the fact that Bush 43 now looks statesmanlike by comparison, that shows just how repugnant this president is. I really, and here's the thing, it's not that I believe that personality is everything. I accept that you can dislike someone, but they can still be a capable statesman. Take Richard Nixon, for example. Nixon was a pretty odious character. He was a liar. He was scandal ridden. He was pretty Machiavellian. Um, but he was a statesman in a way that Trump is not. Say what you want about Richard Nixon, the man wasn't stupid. Trump, I don't think he's necessarily stupid. He's clever enough to win the American presidential race. He's clever enough to get into the ruthless maneuvering that politics has. But I do think he's profoundly ignorant on a lot of issues. And that is deeply alarming when you have access to nuclear buttons. I mean, the things that Trump has come out with, I don't know how anyone, other than the most hardcore Trump supporters, can endorse that. I think the Republicans are backing Trump for partisan reasons. I think there are a lot of Republicans that don't feel that enthusiastic about the president, but they're backing him because they don't want to see the Democrats in office. Now, that is hardly a glowing endorsement of the Trump presidency. The fact that people are backing him just because they don't want the alternative. So I sincerely hope that Trump is kicked out of office. I want, frankly, to be able to say he's a stone cold loser. Because this is a man who has built his entire presidency and his campaign before that on insults. This is a man who, and by the way, that's me. I think, the winning Democrat needs to rise above that. And I'm talking as a, I'm not a leading politician. Um, I just think that Trump, rather than cleaning up the Western world, as his campaign promised, what he has done is deeply, deeply put Western democracy into a sort of chasm. I think he has entrenched partisan feelings. I think he has deepened divisions in society. And the Democrats have partly contributed to that with their identity politics. Totally accept that. But when Trump comes out with stuff like he doesn't know who the KKK are, I mean, with Donald Trump, it's not just one or two things that you're nitpicking, it's a catalogue. You can make an encyclopedia of things that Trump has come out with. And people dismiss this as, oh, well, it's just hot air. He doesn't really mean it. I've heard Trump supporters say, oh, well, yeah, sometimes he says things that are a bit outlandish, but look at his record. Okay, let's look at his record. The only thing that Trump has going for him is the economy is doing relatively well. That's it. And the most vulnerable Americans are not saying that. So that is the only thing I can think of that he has been done relatively well in his presidency. Diplomacy, well, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I said, okay, that Singapore summit, if it leads to a denuclearized North Korea, then Trump will go down as a great statesman. But all that happened was Trump was taken for a ride. The Kim regime has went back to its nuclear program. It was a failure. Trump has praised Vladimir Putin to his face, denigrated his own security services. I cannot comprehend how anyone can think this man is good for Western democracy. Why? Because he speaks out against political correctness. So I just want to see him beaten because I genuinely think that Trump is a liability to American democracy. I don't think he's cleaned up the swamp. I think he has brought the swamp to the White House. But that's my perspective. The people say, "Oh, but Nathan, he bombed ISIS in Syria." Yeah, that was the right move. But again, what we see with this White House is a disconnect between the State Department and Trump himself. I mean, the things he's done in the White House. So, if nothing else, his supporters say he tells it like it is. But he has done the exact opposite of some of the things he promised. For example, he said, I'll stay out of reckless foreign wars. Well, he conducted a military campaign in Syria. Now, I happen to believe that was justified, but it does go against his campaign promises to his core voters. And the only thing that Trump has, what he is going to do in this campaign is he's going to get nasty and personal. He's going to talk about creepy Uncle Joe. He's going to talk about Sleepy Joe because that's all Trump has. This is a president who's far more interested in personal insults than actual policy. And I just hope I'm an outsider. It's not for me to tell the American people how to vote. But I hope people will look beyond Trump's insults and judge him on his record. If you think his record's good, fine. That's a legitimate reason to vote for him. But if you're voting for Trump because he's supposedly cleaning up the swamp, I've seen no evidence that he actually has. Um, what's the Trump administration actually done against supposed corruption or any of the other areas where he claims he's cleaning up the swamp? That's the thing that gets me because he's politically incorrect. Well, I dislike political correctness, but I'm sorry, that is not enough of a reason to be in the White House. Just, I cannot comprehend how people cannot see this man for what he is. A narcissist, um, an ego-driven baby in chief. And yeah, I'm making insults here, but I'm not president of the United States, and that's what matters. Anyway, I'll be looking at the Biden campaign. Like I say, I'm not, really enthusiastic about him, but I do believe he can beat Trump, and I believe that he will restore dignity to the White House. I mean, say what you want about Joe Biden. You may dislike his policies. You may not even trust him. But the fact of the matter is, Joe Biden will not insult allies. He will not denigrate politics the way this president has done.